On October 22nd, 1983, in Marion, Illinois, a small town 5 hours south of Chicago, members of the Aryan Brotherhood, one of the country's most powerful prison gangs, stabbed to death 2 correctional officers in separate attacks on the same day. The bloody incident in Marion prompted the head of the Federal BOP, or Federal Bureau of Prisons, to advocate a new approach, a lockup built specifically to keep problem inmates in near total isolation. The result was a state-of-the-art facility known as ADX Florence, or what many would call a clean version of hell. The $60 million facility opened in 1994 and would house some of the country's most infamous criminals, ranging from gang leaders, terrorists, serial killers, and everything in between. One of those inmates was a man by the name of Manuel Tati Torrez, who on February 2nd, 1999, when hundreds of law enforcement officials suited up in tactical gear and found out across Los Angeles County, armed with search and arrest warrants, they raided homes and businesses, sweeping up hundreds of suspects believed to have gang ties. 27 people were indicted under the RICO Act. These were Mexican Mafia or LAME members, and among them was Manuel Torrez. He was a married father of 4. He was in his 50s, and he spent much of his life in and out of state prisons. His kids would only get used to spending 2 to 3 years at a time, but they loved their dad, they loved hiking, and he also loved when they'd throw a mattress in the back of the truck and go to the drive-in movies. However, as time would pass, eventually, Manuel Tati Torres' life, his choices, and the people he chose to call his family and his gang would all catch up with him.
This just-released footage of El Chapo shows the drug lord looking teary-eyed and in shock after he was flown to New York. He now faces a life sentence at Supermax prison in Colorado, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Its infamous inmates include the Boston Marathon bomber, the Unabomber, and the shoe bomber who tried to bring down a plane. Cells are small at Supermax. The furniture is made of stone, not metal. I spoke by phone to former Supermax warden Bob Hood. How difficult would it be for him to even try to escape?
Well, no one has so far since 1994 when they opened. But in El Chapo type of confinement at the Supermax, he will be in his cell about 23 hours a day. He'll have cameras all over him.
You'll remember this surveillance video of El Chapo escaping through a tunnel dug under his prison cell in Mexico in 2015. No such luck with Supermax. It's built into solid rock.
I want to focus on what I will call the jails indictment, which outlines a criminal enterprise run by the Mexican Mafia that controlled drug trafficking and extortion activities throughout the LA County jail system. The indictment focuses on Jose Landa Rodriguez, who was the leader of the Mexican Mafia in the LA County jail system, and who oversaw a group of gang leaders and soldiers who imposed his will on inmates in the facilities. The jail's indictment alleges that Landa Rodriguez controlled all drug trafficking in the jails. The organization would arrange for cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin to be smuggled into the jails, often through accomplices who hid the drugs in body cavities and who got themselves intentionally arrested on minor charges. The organization would then sell drugs to inmates. The Mexican Mafia had a range of supporters that participated in the racketeering enterprise. For example, there were a number of associates who smuggled drugs into the jails, and there were people who passed messages directing criminal activities between those in the jail and gang leaders on the streets. This communications network, which often included wives and girlfriends, was a vital link that allowed incarcerated Mexican Mafia leaders to communicate with gang leaders on the streets. But wives and girlfriends were not the only link to the outside world. This morning, we also arrested a lawyer who is accused of being a key facilitator for the organization. If they are convicted, many of the defendants will face decades in federal prison, and they will be scattered to prisons all over the country, far from their power base here in Southern California. With this morning's operation, we have delivered a significant blow to a cold-blooded prison gang and their associates. The jail's indictment dismantled a criminal enterprise that affected many of the jail's 15,000 plus inmates and the overall security of the facilities.
A major blow to the Mexican Mafia in Southern California. Raids led to dozens of arrests. CBS 2's Dave Lopez is live in downtown L.A. with information on what the gang members are accused of. Dave.
Well, all kinds of things, all the way to murder, racketeering, embezzlement, drug trafficking, all from behind bars. 87 were targeted, all but 16 were arrested, so 16 fugitives. So detectives say this was a very good day for them as far as this investigation went that lasted almost 4 years.
I'm not going to say that we've decimated this gang. We have made a very substantial blow against this gang.
And the numbers are impressive. In a pre-dawn raid, more than 500 law enforcement officers arrested 32 alleged gang members off the street and 35 alleged members of the Mexican Mafia who were serving time in LA County Jail awaiting their trials, transferred them to federal custody, and included in the arrest the so-called ringleader, Jose Landa Rodriguez, described by some gang experts to me as, quote, the most powerful, influential inmate in county jail.
Landa Rodriguez controlled all drug trafficking in the jails.
The indictment alleges all on orders from Landa Rodriguez, 55 years of age. And the indictment says he had help from an attorney, Gabriel Sendejas Chavez, who was arrested this morning at his home in Ontario.
The contraband is already inside the cell.
Detectives say the Mexican Mafia had such control and the system was so well run that anyone who didn't cooperate or try to go against them was beaten,
stabbed, kidnapped, and killed. These attacks were designed to instill discipline for violating Mexican Mafia rules.
Detectives say this is taken from security video in the jail that shows Mexican Mafia members beating an inmate who wouldn't cooperate. And the indictment also says that Landa Rodriguez ordered at least 3 murders out on the street.
Weapons that we recover.
The investigation alleges that Landa Rodriguez had such power that from behind bars, he would order gang members on the street to purposely break the law and get arrested so they could smuggle drugs into the county jail. Again, investigators say that the Mexican Mafia has been crippled, not completely taken out of business, but their leader is gone. And the big question is, how was he able to stay in county jail for almost 4 years to do all of this and never have to go to court for whatever he was being charged with for embezzlement? The answer there is...
Breaking news out of Corcoran State Prison tonight. The purported leader of the Mexican Mafia has been stabbed to death. Officials say 64-year-old Danny Roman was attacked and stabbed by 2 other inmates. Roman was accused of running street gang operations throughout California from behind bars. Gang experts say if this was not a, quote, sanctioned mafia hit, it could lead to more violence.
What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of Greenlit Gang TV. Appreciate you guys checking out the channel. Was doing some research, came across this really, really good story about ADX Florence, Colorado's first murder. It was the first murder in the Supermax. Really, really fascinating case. A really good insight was done. Multiple articles, multiple stories were told. Really breaking down this attack, and it wasn't as clean cut and as cut and dry as what people had said it was. So we were talking about in the intro, guy by the name of Manuel Tati Torrez. He was a very infamous Mexican Mafia leader who had come up in the streets of LA. And was very, very well respected. And even though by the time this attack had happened and when he, really got to the ADX Florence, he got wrapped up in the RICO in 1999 when they did basically a big gang roundup. And that's how they were really going after these gangs. There was another RICO that had come down in 1995. And they were really, really going after these infamous prison gangs. I believe... I know it was. In the late 90s, early 2000s, they had a big one for the Aryan Brotherhood as well. That's where you first saw about Barry Mills, T.D. Bingham. So this is kind of another example of that. These RICO cases, when they would come down, again, remember the RICO was used first on the mob to bring down the heads of the 5 families. It's a way to get to the bosses, okay, because these guys are so insulated. You're plucking off soldiers or individuals. It really doesn't do anything, right? It's like putting a Band-Aid on cancer. It just doesn't do anything. So the RICO Act was a way to literally completely wipe out organizations or complete areas in places like Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Texas, Florida, wherever of particular gang activity or particular people that had risen up into extreme levels of power. And then you have ADX Florence. So all this is kind of coinciding with each other. You've got, like I talked about in the intro, the murders of the correctional officers in the 80s, and that was the infamous Thomas Silverstein, Clayton Fountain, Merle Klutz, separate attacks, and just really, really shone a light on Supermax prisons and the violence that goes on behind these prison walls. So you had this state-of-the-art facility. You had ADX Florence created, and it was meant to be just the end-all to end-all, right? Well, they were still able, gangs can still operate. These guys, these gang leaders are smart. They're very well spoken. They have respect for themselves. They carry respect for others. They are not, I've always said this, people think these gang members are dumb or uneducated. No, far from it. These guys are smarter than your average person. They know what to do. They know how to manipulate. They're almost sociopathic, narcissistic in a way, where whatever it takes to do, whatever it takes to get what they want, they're going to do. And they're going to be able to influence other people to do their bidding as well. And, it's what happened on April 21st, 2005. Manuel Tati Torrez was murdered. So we're going to kind of jump to a murder trial that was taking place after his hit. So I'm going to read from an article. A reputed hitman testified at a federal murder trial that a boss of the Mexican Mafia ordered a hit against a fellow inmate, but was beaten to death himself before he could give a signal to kill the man. Who he's talking about? He's talking about Manuel Tati Torrez. That was the guy. Manuel Tati Torrez was the Mexican Mafia boss who had ordered a hit against a fellow inmate, but somebody beat him to it. And it was, it was a big, big deal. So the hit takes place, and it talks about the story I read about how guards were watching the cameras. They brought him out for rec. It happened in the morning, around 8, 9 a.m. in the morning. And, guards, they bring him out for rec, and they're watching groups, and it happens so fast. It happened so fast. Groups of the Mexican Mafia were in there, hanging out. And before you know it, there's Manuel Tati Torrez laid out, and it blew up. It absolutely blew up. So Serrano hitman Arcadio Perez testified during this trial that on the same day that Manuel Tati Torrez marked inmate Sylvester Chicali Rivera for death, Rivera and an accomplice struck first, beating Torrez to death in the yard of Administrative Max U.S. Penitentiary, or ADX in Florence. Torrez's death on April 21st, 2005 marked the first murder in the history of Supermax, the highest security prison in the U.S. Rivera and accomplice Richard Chuco Santiago are accused of killing Torrez in a caged exercise yard. Rivera faces life in prison if convicted, and Santiago could get the death penalty. They claim that they didn't attack until after Torrez told them he ordered their murders. Rivera is claiming self-defense. Perez, a bald man with a salt and pepper goatee, testified that he felt conflicted when Torrez ordered the hit because Rivera had been his cellmate and the two were friends. But he said he couldn't ignore the order from Torrez, a powerful gang leader. And get this, and this is true, and I believe this. So he goes on to talk about, I'm conflicted, but at the end of the day, Torrez is the boss. What he says goes. And he says he's told Torrez that he got along with Rivera. And they said the gang leader stopped what he was doing, and he threatened his life. And he, quote, said, "If you don't do it, it will be done to you." Perez said through a court interpreter, it said because Perez basically only spoke Spanish. He, quote, goes on to say, because he was a person who had a lot of power. He was aggressive, he was a bully, and he was arrogant. Under cross-examination, prosecutor Valerie Spencer asked why he didn't intervene on behalf of Torrez once the gang leader came under attack. Perez replied that Santiago, like Torrez, is a member of the Mexican Mafia, and he is not. So Perez is in a heck of a predicament here, right? You've got, Arcadio Perez is not a member of the Mexican Mafia. Torrez is not only a member, but he is a reputed gang boss. I mean, he's not only just a member, but he's a leader. He's the one calling the shots. And then on the other side of that, you got Richard Chuco Santiago. He's also a high-ranking member of the Mexican Mafia. These guys aren't in ADX Florence as just baseline soldiers of the Mexican Mafia or Liame. These guys are the top of the top. They're the cream of the crop. They're the best of what they have to offer. And again, I read out... I do read the part where he says he was aggressive and he was arrogant, and that is so true. I've been around, not Mexican Mafia leaders or anything like that, but I've been around gang members who are smart. You know, I've been around as a recovering addict. I've been around just, I don't mean to be rude, but I've been around just your kind of, I don't want to say lames, but just basic guys they get put on their hoods or their neighborhoods or their block or whatever, and they're just flashing colors, doing their thing, but they got bad habits. They don't carry themselves with respect. They don't respect themselves. They don't respect other people. They're not the smartest. And you're just kind of like, whatever. But I've also, on the flip side, I've been around guys who are smart and well-spoken. And you can tell people look up to them with a sense of, what do you call it? Like an awe of them, right? And I can see that with this Torrez guy, you know. With Tati Torrez. He's a guy with kids. He's a guy who's been in the streets. He's accomplished a lot. He's smart. He's well-spoken. He's made a lot of money. And, you know, I believe that when you hear that he's arrogant or that he's, you know, doesn't care, 100%, you know. In a way, I kind of think it's like a defense tactic, right? You have to carry yourself with a certain... just a certain way. You got to act like nothing bothers you, nothing phases you. You're the aggressive one. You're the alpha male. Because you're at that level, when you're in that high ranking of a prison, when you're in that much of a lockdown, high security prison, you are with, like I said, the best of the best, the cream of the crop. And to stand out from that, you better carry yourself in an absolutely certain way. So, you know, it is what it is. In Perez, he doesn't know what to do. So it's kind of like he's going to go with whoever jumps off first, right? So if Torrez had acted on Santiago, you know, okay, then that's what he's rolling with. And like it happened the flip side, then that's what he's rolling with. That makes total sense. Other witnesses have testified that the Mexican Mafia was an elite Hispanic gang on par with the Italian Mafia, with only about 300 members across the country. But like we've talked about, there are 56,000 Serranos like Perez, and they take orders from Liame. He later testified under redirect questioning by the defense that if a Serrano intervened in a fight between two main members of the Mexican Mafia, that person would, quote, be killed. And that was really interesting to read. I did not know that. I mean, you could kind of assume that, like if they posed a question and you were like, what do you think would happen? I would say that too, like they'd probably die, but I think that's really interesting. So Perez is a Serrano gang member, and he's looking at two made Mexican Mafia guys. It's a terrible spot to be in. So prosecutors went on to say that Rivera and Santiago could be seen circulating through the yard, conspiring with other inmates in the minutes before they pounced on Torrez in a corner of the yard not always covered by surveillance cameras. Other inmates continued exercising during the fatal beating as if nothing was happening. And that's very true. You hear about that even in a little bit of my little bit of county jail time I've done on and off. Fight would break out. That's just what it is, man. You keep your head down, you keep eating, you keep working out, you keep playing cards. You don't want to draw any attention because you don't want to be the one gawking or in awe. You want to act like you've been there before, even if you haven't, right? So this just makes total sense. 27 people in awe, 27 people had been indicted initially when Torrez got sent to the ADX. And even at the ADX, which is, again, like we talked about, the best of the best, he gained a reputation as one of the graying old guard. He moved slowly when officers escorted him down a hallway or up a flight of stairs. Sometimes he had to steady himself. His son, who they were interviewing in this story, his name was Andres. He was 39 at the time of this story. This is a few years ago. His father had suffered a stroke. So, I mean, he was an old man, okay? And the staff at ADX didn't even realize that Torrez was the man missing until everything had settled down. They'd went to do a count, and he was the one missing. So, you know, guys, It's just another example, right? A guy that rose up through the ranks. Sounds like he had a pretty good life, and he didn't get indicted. I mean, he was in like his, late 40s, early 50s when he gets indicted. So like they said, he'd had a pretty good life, even for being a fully active gang member. It talks about in the story his kids had seen him get arrested. Like I said, he'd get out 2 or 3 years free, go back for a couple years, get out. But they loved their dad. They did. They loved their dad. He was still a beloved guy until, the final nail comes, which is that RICO act. And then when you get sent to somewhere like ADX, man, it's basically a wrap. And at that age too, even if you didn't get life, let's just say he went in at 50 years old, just keep it a solid, easy number. Let's say he went in at 50. I mean, even 20-year sentence, hopefully he could stay within good health, but it didn't sound like he was. It's almost a life sentence. So the point is, there's always someone bigger. There's always someone stronger. He's a boss. He's carrying himself arrogantly. He's carrying himself like he's been there, done that. He's barking orders. He's thinking he's going to get this guy. And when it comes down to it, life or death, someone got to him first, man. And it's just as simple as that. And guess what? After the commotion, everything died down. These guys, these gang members, these officers in the prison, they've all seen this stuff before, and life goes on. And it's a sad end. It's a sad end. It can be a sad existence. I encourage anybody, again, in all my videos, I try to say a lot of the same positive things. I don't like to sound lame or square because and on all that, I hate all this social media, influencer, you got to do this and this and this, man, but just try to live a good life. Don't take the small things for granted. Get sober. If you need the help, get the help. And just try to live a good life, man. Try to be a good person. Love the ones that care about you. And take one day at a... take one day at a time. That's the easiest way to say it. I'm trying to word this thing right. But you know what? When it comes down to it, you want to take this thing one day at a time. Like I said, if you're struggling with substance abuse, depression, whatever, talk to somebody, get the help. It's absolutely worth it. So there you guys have it. Hope you guys enjoyed the story. This one's super, super interesting. First murder at the ADX Florence, Colorado. Until next time, guys. Peace out.